Hey guys, Spirit of the Lie here. 7 years ago at the zenith of Game of Thrones hype, some might remember I covered a custom scenario on HD giving players a chance to roleplay as each of the kings of Westeros, with all of the cutthroat diplomacy that entails. I recently found out though about a different scenario in Definitive Edition, which follows a similar idea but is if anything even more immersive visually, with custom-made graphics for many buildings and player flags, capturing elements of the TV show and book series A Song of Ice and Fire. The scenario is called Clash of Kings, made by SuperDomeDome and Purple Lightsaber as co-creators, with LablondeJames contributing to the modding. In this video, we're going to go through an abridged summary of a particularly interesting game. Though before that, we should probably take a moment to overview the map and talk about some of the unique twists that go into this particular take on a very popular scenario theme. To start with our brief tour, we have King's Landing, including the Sept of Baelor and the Red Keep, both of which have custom graphics very faithful to the show. What's fun is these are location-unique buildings, so if either of these is destroyed and a regular old castle is built by another player, the custom graphics are then reapplied, just in the new player's color, which is true of all castle locations on the map. King's Landing is particularly important in this scenario, as it can be part of some players' random victory condition, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also notable in King's Landing is that every 20 minutes anywhere from 1 up to 3 relics will spawn. A simple way to win the scenario is to garrison 7 relics under your control, and keep them garrisoned during a 25-minute countdown, during which everyone will try to attack you and work together to stop you from winning the game. The biggest rule for this scenario is simply that you don't give your relics to other players to propel them to victory, but stealing relics from a defeated opponent is completely fair game. In addition to this, when the in-game timer hits 5 minutes, you can then reveal your secondary win condition. There are 4 possibilities you can get, 2 of which involve controlling King's Landing with an extra condition. 1 involves completely taking over 2 enemy regions and rebuilding their key castles, crepos, and towers, and the final one involves securing 3 out of 4 neutral castle locations on the map. What's cool is which of the 4 objectives you get is a secret, so not only is there the standard relic victory to think about, but you can instead focus entirely on trying to covertly achieve your secondary win condition, while then keeping an eye out on other players whose aggressive actions might be revealing their win condition. While King's Landing is a common target, the fact it's also the source of relics means at least at the start of the game, Red has some leverage in who they give out those relics to in order to antagonize or placate certain kingdoms. But at a certain point, you have to believe at least one player is gunning for it, often with an ally or 2 at their side. Moving on from King's Landing, Red also has a main base in the west, with Casterly Rock as their capital and a second castle at the Golden Tooth. Next stop on our tour is Blue in the center, representing the Tullys. Their main 2 landmarks are their capital River Run and the important crossing point of the Twins. There are only 3 ways to pass from north to south on land, and Blue controls 2 of them, making Blue a potentially important ally, but also a possibly early target, given they're within easy striking range of 6 of the 7 other players. Moving on to green, we have House Tyrell, always growing strong. Their 3 castles are in Highgarden, Hightower, and Horn Hill, and as a bit of flavor, they build full works instead of mills, while also getting the Frank's free mill upgrade bonus and the option to research Burgundian vineyards, so their farmers are always top tier in a few ways. To the south in yellow, we then have Dorne. They're a little more spread out, but are fairly well protected, only being reachable on land through 2 very narrow choke points, and having just 2 possible landing sites in the south by water. To their northeast, in orange, we have the Baratheons, holding Dragonstone as their island capital. The graphic for this one might be my favorite castle, as I think it really nails the look. They then hold a few other small islands and have a foothold on the land as well, where 2 of their other castles stand in striking distance of King's Landing. Jumping north, we then have Cyan as House Arryn in the Vale, with their capital at the Eyrie. In this scenario, their leader is the young Robert Arryn, renamed Robin in the show to avoid confusion with Robert Baratheon. They only have 2 castles instead of the usual 3, but are actually among the harder for enemies to attack, as they have just 1 narrow pass through the mountains to enter on land, along with the vast majority of their coast being protected by cliffs. Looking to the north, we then reach House Stark in Grey, with their capital of Winterfell. They have 3 well-fortified towns, as well as then easy access to Castle Black and the Wall. And finally, the last house is Greyjoy in purple to the west. They only have 2 castles, but are obviously quite difficult to attack, as you need a strong navy and then to land them with transport ships. Not only do they have longboats to replace the regular galley line, giving them an edge on water through conventional means, but they then also spawn custom turtle ships with better stats and healing, which are slowly generated as long as you keep your capital Pike and your leader Balon Greyjoy alive. They also then have a small foothold in the north on land, making the Starks a tempting early target. There's then a neutral location to the east at Braavos. You can bring relics here to sell for 4,000 gold each, or buy a relic for 15,000 gold by placing your lord at the Iron Bank. Given the relic spawns at King's Landing every 20 minutes can give 1, 2, or 3 at a time, the appeal of buying or selling relics will naturally vary between games. One last mechanic to mention is there's then 4 neutral castle sites. These open up at 35 minutes into the game, and whichever player builds a castle on them first gets a small buff throughout the game depending on their faction. Controlling 3 of these 4 is also one of the secondary win conditions that you can randomly start with. These are strategically placed between players to encourage either negotiation or early war over these spots, and castles placed in these locations then have custom graphics of course as well. Given you cannot place castles outside of one of the designated locations, and all castles generate a passive trickle of resources like a Feitoria, you can imagine these are hotly contested. There's different unique texts for each kingdom that we could get into, but I think what we've seen covers enough of the scenario to take a look at a game and see how this all plays out. The game we'll look at was sent to me by one of the creators of the scenario and was 3 hours long if going by the in-game timer, which I've tried to cut down to a more reasonable length while hitting the highlights. With that, let's jump in. In this particular game, the deal-making and backstabbing began almost immediately with a secret pact between House Arryn and Baratheon. While Lord Arryn had a bad case of ligma and couldn't make the requested trip to Dragonstone, the alliance will hold strong for the next 3 hours. On the other side of the map though, diplomacy got off to a rockier start. After House Tyrell gave the Greyjoys permission to mine gold on their land in exchange for support against the Lannisters, the Greyjoys happily took the gold, but sent secret messages to Tywin to warn him about the threat to his south. Of course, the Lannisters may very well have suspected something funny going on anyway, as the Tyrells began massing military buildings along their border. At the same time, the Lannisters were also probably distracted by the arms race happening with the Tullys around Harrenhal, which was set to open from its renovations at any moment. In the north, the Starks were likewise massing troops to take their own neutral castle location without any competition. With access to Harrenhal granted, war immediately broke out between the Lannisters and Tullys. While Blue's army was victorious, Red secured the important strategic location. The Tullys may very well have rallied to counterattack, except at that very moment they were the target of a war declaration from House Arryn. A swarm of rams, heavy cavalry, and cavalry archers flooded into the Twins, forcing the Tullys to sign a quick peace with the Lannisters. In a matter of moments, one of Blue's 3 castles would be destroyed, though the Tullys would halt the invasion there, greatly ramping up their military production in the process. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the other kings, the Tyrells made a quick invasion of Braavos. This gave them access to a relic and sole control over buying and selling additional ones. Meanwhile, in the south, House Martell of Dorne, much like the show, didn't have a lot going on, but we will check on them now and then. With Blue now distracted by Cyan, the Lannisters began putting plans in motion to attack the Tyrells, massing heavy cavalry unlocked by being the first to construct Harrenhal, along with some archers in siege. A storm was clearly gathering in the west. Likewise, the Greyjoys, at this point, not even keeping up the appearance of supporting the Tyrells against the Lannisters, began moving their fleet east. Their secret objective is to take King's Landing, while meanwhile accumulating 1,000 unit kills and 110 raises. So watching the Lannisters fight an exhausting war one-on-one against the Tyrells, as the Greyjoys get involved in any other war possible, played perfectly into their plans. Upon arriving, they immediately declared war against House Arryn, under the guise, of course, of supporting peace and House Tully. From the north, Robb Stark eyed all of this with interest. His secret win condition was to take King's Landing as well as 2 other capitals. He didn't need to completely eliminate 2 players, but having just been in a surprise war, Blue was weakened and his capital Riverrun was looking mighty tempting. House Arryn was also no longer in a position to weaken the Tullys further, being occupied with their own naval raiding and transport landings. If the Starks wanted to take advantage of the chaos and Blue's temporary weakness, it was really now or never. Robb Stark launched into action declaring war on the Tullys, sending an army of rams south, following an alternate route to bypass their well-defended bridge, and avoiding any Red Wedding shenanigans. This was a straight-shot attempt at Blue's capital, and while progress went well at first, blasting through gates and fortifications, the Tullys were stronger than expected, and halted the Northern Storm. Moments later though, another war erupted between House Lannister and Tyrell. While this may appear to be a response to the Greyjoys' early warning, worth knowing is that Red's secret objective is to control 3 neutral castle sites and conquer an entire region. With Harrenhal already secured as 1 neutral castle, Castamere held by Green as a 2nd neutral castle easily within reach, and the Reach also within reach, Red would nearly have victory secured if the Tyrells fell quickly. The Tyrells though had been growing strong, preparing for their own invasion at this very moment. Now, I hate to interrupt the action with a Dorne subplot, but this is Game of Thrones. As it turns out, this is the first action they've seen all game, with a surprise invasion by sea from House Baratheon. After a hard-fought naval landing, Stannis revealed he only wanted to capture Sunspear to research a unique tech that can only be obtained there. House Martell agreed to this, leading to a short-lived occupation and then full retreat. This is quite literally the last time we'll look at Dorne, and the fact this game even included a pointless seeming visit to Dorne shows the level of dedication to capturing the essence of the show. Meanwhile, to the north, the Lannister invasion of the Reach was suddenly not going according to plan, with Green's units flooding into the Westerlands. The war between House Greyjoy and House Arryn was also undergoing a bit of a reversal, with Knights of the Vale traveling north to remove the Greyjoys' hold on the mainland. The Iron Fleet still raided the coastline of the Vale mostly unchallenged, but at this moment it became clear the Greyjoys had made a miscalculation, as this placed their fleet on the completely wrong side of Westeros if they were to defend their home territory, something that did not go unnoticed by the Starks and Tullys, who had just signed a white peace. While their secret objectives would conflict when it came to how to divide up the Iron Islands, that could be sorted out later, and in the meantime, the islands had precious few defenders. In fact, the Iron Navy couldn't have been more poorly placed for an invasion if they tried. When war came to their shores, the Greyjoys were completely unprepared for both the overwhelming naval force as well as the Stark ground invasion. A small navy was mustered to give resistance, but was quickly defeated, and in short order the capital of Pike was burned as a Stark army of archers and giants planted a new flag on the island. Not only did this open up an entire region to be claimed by any player, but also meant House Arryn would be freed from the Greyjoy raids and could plan their next move, which would come momentarily. I should also note by this point, Robert Arryn had fully grown after a few years of war into his Giga Chad form. Meanwhile, to the west, the Tyrells continued their slow march into Lannister territory. The Lannisters were greatly weakened, relying almost entirely on their castles for the production and resources to create troops, but were so far holding fast. What the Lannisters didn't see coming, though, was a now freed up army of the Vale as it descended upon Harrenhal and King's Landing. A small army was gathered, but within the day, House Arryn's troops were in the city, quickly joined in war by House Martell, who have a secret objective to control the Red Keep. I said we wouldn't see Dorne proper again, but Dornish troops are now pillaging the capital. Sensing his grip over the mainland was waning, Tywin did the only prudent thing and hopped on a boat to set sail for the now empty Iron Islands. Surprisingly, those had been left almost entirely unclaimed, and the Lannisters would live to fight another day. To the east, King's Landing now lay in ruins, and with Yellow and Grey requiring full control over King's Landing to fulfill their secret win conditions, tension over who would claim it was mounting. In fact, the only player not in a position to contest King's Landing was the Lannisters, who, with the loss of resources from the capital, were finally overthrown on the mainland by the Tyrells, securing the first of two regions that Green would need for his secret win condition. After some squabbling in the capital, House Arryn took control of the Red Keep, and his secret ally Stannis Baratheon took the Sept of Baelor over the objections of House Martell. This brief moment of peace, though, was immediately shattered by House Stark, who again declared war on the Tullys, still needing to secure two enemy capitals. During the squabbling over King's Landing, the Starks also took the opportunity to bully the Lannisters out of Pike. With control over the Tullys' capital as well, the Starks would only need to secure the Red Keep at this point to instantly win the game. This second invasion was backed up by a strong naval force, but would probably be destined to end in a similar stalemate to the last one, except that House Arryn, counting their own 5 relics and seeing the Tullys' 3, did some quick math and realized they could make a play to win the game by attacking from the south, while Blue's attention was fixated on the north. They instantly declared war, toppling Harrenhal for the third time of the game and executing a pinch maneuver on the Tully capital. While the Stark skirmishers threw 2 javelins per shot due to being the first to build Moat Cailin, the Knights of the Vale broke through first, toppling River Run and releasing the Tully relics. With the Starks in no position to challenge House Arryn directly with what they had present at the moment, they redirected their armies toward the twins, as Cyan quietly ran off with the last 2 relics he would need for victory. At the same time, far to the west, outside the attention of the other players, the Tyrells' originally defensive and now looking increasingly aggressive war against the Lannisters had made its way to the Iron Islands. Green now owned all of Red's original base, and now had nearly free reign over Purple's original base as well, with no one left in Westeros prepared to answer Tywin's call for aid. Moments later, with his monks arriving though, House Arryn began the 25-minute countdown toward victory. The realm would have no choice but to surrender if they couldn't destroy the monastery within that time. Instantly, the secret pact with House Baratheon was broken, along with all other kingdoms immediately declaring war on the Vale. If the countdown could be stopped, the Starks, Baratheons, and Martells would have an entire new region to divide amongst themselves. If not, the Starks would have unwittingly just handed victory to the Vale by invading the Riverlands and helping free up the Tullys relics. A massive invasion on land and sea ensued, with the once friendly Baratheons burning the east coast while Starks and Martells pushed on land, and even the Lannisters sent their fleet and a few rams to help the war effort. It was a desperate final push, and despite pleas from House Arryn, the combined strength of 4 land armies proved to be just enough to stop the timer with precious minutes remaining, spilling 7 potentially game-winning relics harmlessly onto the ground. House Arryn was defeated and resigned, but the seeds for either another to claim relic victory and fail, or to show the strength to endure the countdown appeared to be moments away. It was at this moment that the forgotten House Tyrell, sitting at the western edge of the known world, suddenly declared war on the Starks, attacking Pike. With their secret win condition of conquering and rebuilding 2 enemy regions in grasp, it was time to drop the facade of a defensive war against the Lannisters, and secure the Iron Islands for ultimate victory. All that stood in the way was a single castle in Krepos that needed to be destroyed and rebuilt. The Martells rallied, attempting to invade the Reach, but lacked the necessary siege. Having sent nearly all of their combined armies and navies to the Vale moments earlier, none besides perhaps the Starks could have reached the Iron Islands in time. The Baratheons, for their part, didn't even try, electing instead to build a quick monastery and collect these 7 relics for themselves, hopelessly planning to defend a ruined Vale against the remaining players. But it was all for naught. In the end, it was not the power of armies, but the power of builders, who put the final nail in the other players' coffins, completing the last Krepos to give Tyrells full control over their home region and 2 others, completing their secret win condition. Seeing the Tyrells turn the Lannisters' failed invasion into 1 captured region, and a surprise betrayal by the Starks and Tullys against House Greyjoy into their 2nd region, the other lords realized the Tyrells had truly grown strong. With the impeccable logic that Mace Tyrell clearly had the best story out of all of them, the Lords of Westeros bowed before their new king. If you want to check out the scenario yourself, it's on the mod workshop under Clash of Kings. Just make sure you have the data mod set and have turned off the enhanced graphics settings in order to see the new buildings, which only work on the lower quality. Other than that, big thanks to Samantha, James, Jared2142, Justin, Steven, Woodruff, and everyone else on Patreon for their awesome support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.